Hey, do you guys like to watch fireworks?
Yeah, they're so pretty.
Who doesn't like fireworks? They're so popular all over the world.
I like them too, but did you know that they can cause air pollution?
Really? What's so bad about them?
Well, in addition to producing particulate matter pollution, when fireworks combust, they release perchlorates into the atmosphere.
What are perchlorates?
So they're used as oxidizers for things like fireworks, as well as safety flares, explosives, rockets even. So in addition to being exposed to them during fireworks shows, people who live near military bases or research facilities are also really exposed to perchlorates in the atmosphere. Perchlorates can also indirectly end up in our food and our water sources, and they can cause issues with hormone production when we inhale them or consume them.
Did you say hormone production? I took 8th grade biology and I think that has something to do with the endocrine system. That's new to me.
Perchlorates have been found to disrupt the thyroid and hormones, which can impact fetal development in pregnant women and disrupt the production of thyroid hormones in other individuals, which leads to weight gain and muscle weakness.
Those symptoms don't seem too out of the ordinary.
Well, the thyroid's hormones regulate everything like vital body functions, including breathing, heart rate, the central nervous systems, body temperature, body weight, menstrual cycles, cholesterol levels, and even your mood. Like, you can get depression if you have thyroid problems. Those all seem really serious to me.
Yeah, and this sort of thyroid disruption is also really significant in the way it impacts pregnant women and fetal development. It's been linked to brain disorders as well as inhibiting physical development for infants.
So we're breathing this stuff in every time we watch fireworks outside?
Basically, but people are most likely to be affected by perchlorates from fireworks during large fireworks displays with just a ton of fireworks over a really short period of time.
So, you mean holidays like 4th of July in the United States, Diwali in India, Guy Fawkes Night in the UK, or New Year's Eve basically all over the world? I mean, I've heard that the US alone uses 60,000 pounds of fireworks in a year.
Wow, sounds like the best way to avoid being exposed is to stay at home during 4th of July.
Well, I would recommend you taking iodine supplement after watching fireworks because it prevents hypothyroidism caused by perchlorate. Iodine is really essential to make thyroid hormones.
Wow, that's a pretty good idea. And other than just staying indoors all the time, how can we remove perchlorates from the air so we can enjoy being outside?
Perchlorates are water soluble, so they are removed from the air naturally by rain or snow. However, this causes water and soil contamination, which has just as much of an effect on human health because we eat perchlorates by eating vegetables, which was grown in contaminated soil.
So, maybe governments should just limit the amount of firework displays in a single area to reduce the concentration of perchlorate pollution.
That's a pretty good idea. I haven't heard of any regulations on perchlorates in the atmosphere, at least in the United States, but the EPA recently proposed regulations on the concentration of perchlorates allowed in drinking water. This would limit the concentration to 56 micrograms per liter. And California has their own drinking water standards, which limits perchlorate concentrations to 6 micrograms per liter.
So is it possible to produce fireworks that don't release perchlorates and use something else that won't be harmful to the people that watch them?
We used to make fireworks using potassium chlorate, but now we use potassium perchlorate because it is more stable. But still, more research is needed to replace potassium perchlorate. Scientists have succeeded in replacing toxic chemicals that make colors, so now we can make green flames without using barium, but they are still struggling to find environmental friendly oxidizer.
Wow, I read a 2007 study by the EPA where they found that perchlorate levels in Oklahoma surface waters increased between 24 to over 1,000 times the baseline levels after an Independence Day fireworks display. And it took 20 to 80 days for those levels to go back down.
You said 1,000 times, and you said 80 days? That's like 2 months of dangerous water.
Do you know any kind of current remediation technology?
Well, there are currently no proposed technologies for removing perchlorate directly from the air, and that's just because perchlorates readily settle out of the air due to wet or dry deposition. Most current technologies are focused on removing perchlorates in the water. For example, there are ion exchanges that use perchlorate selective resins and membrane technologies that use reverse osmosis. There are biological approaches too, such as perchlorate removing bacteria.
Well, that sounds promising. How much would it cost to do all that?
An ion exchange system that would operate for 19 hours per day and use around 30 huge columns that absorb the perchlorate would have a capital cost of $2 million and an operating cost of $145 per acre. And the proposed area is 8.6 million acres, meaning that the operating cost would be over $1.2 billion per year.
1.2 billion just for that much land? Is there anything like more cost effective or cheaper than that?
Well, the cheapest remediation technology, which is using bacteria to remove the perchlorates, would have a capital cost of $35 million and an annual operating cost of $6.6 million.
Really? Can the governments put more restrictions and regulations on those manufacturing the fireworks so they can use less perchlorates and maybe a different oxidizer? Because if it's in the air, it's going to eventually end up in the water. That will save, and it would save us a lot of money when it comes to like treating the water that's contaminated.
Yeah, those water treatment expenses or technologies are pretty expensive. But we can also think about the human health cost. And if we limit the amount of perchlorate pollution that humans are exposed to, then we're limiting the number of people that might contract hypothyroidism due to that exposure. And so that could really save a lot of money on health treatment.
Well, currently, treatment for hypothyroidism in the US can cost nearly $100 million per million people that are screened for hypothyroidism over a lifetime.
So, that sounds like a lot. Does anyone have any other ideas for removing perchlorates directly from the air to prevent all these health costs?
Well, so what if, after a huge fireworks display, we had planes fly over to spray water and induce artificial rain so that the perchlorates drop out of the air into water that's immediately collected so that it's not getting into our groundwater and we're not inhaling it?
That sounds good. Is it feasible to spray water after every large firework display? Like they put fireworks on at like the Super Bowl, 4th of July, New Year's. Like doing it every time, is that the best option?
Well, now China is really well known for artificial precipitation, and they create 55 billion tons of artificial rain each year. It costs them $168 million to create artificial rain. So putting government regulations on whether or not fireworks contain perchlorate might be the most cost-effective idea.
Okay. What about changing the way we do fireworks shows? Maybe incorporating lights to keep the experience entertaining, but much safer, and then creating the artificial rain so we wouldn't have to technically create as much because there'll be less perchlorate in the air.
Well, something definitely needs to be done because 5 out of every 100 people over the age of 12 suffer from hyperthyroidism in the U.S. That's just in the U.S. And I wonder how many of those are genetic and how many are developed due to high exposure to perchlorates. How would people know whether it's genetic or whether they just went to too many fireworks shows? Like, think about how many families take their kids to firework displays without knowing anything about how dangerous perchlorates can be to the thyroid.
Yeah, if people were more aware that fireworks could have such a serious adverse health effect, would that public concern cause the government to start having to make more stringent regulations on firework displays and other sources of perchlorates?
Yeah, it seems like remediation of perchlorates in the environment and removal from these very expensive technologies is maybe not the most feasible option due to the very high operating costs. But regulation of the problem before it even occurs at the source seems pretty feasible.
Yeah, I agree with that. So if we have less in the air, then we won't have to worry about it. Do you have any input on that?
Well, I mean, the EPA put in another proposal to change the restrictions, so maybe making the restrictions as stringent as the 6 micrograms per liter that's in California everywhere. Would that have an impact versus the 56 micrograms per liter that's currently in place?
Yeah, that's a pretty big range. So we could probably close that gap and it could help. It also opens the door for maybe we could find something else out. I know the military is doing research to have more efficient flares for when they do battle exercises. So if we can use that technology and kind of apply it everywhere, it could help.
Yeah. And would it really be that harmful if less fireworks shows were done in the U.S. and around the world? Like, if government regulations end up causing that, there's other things that people can entertain themselves with. But regardless, perchlorate is a really big pollution problem that something needs to be done.
I agree. Good points.